Let's talk about your cabinet picks. I know we started off talking about Pete Hegseth, but I just want to return to that very quickly. Have you gotten assurances from senators that he's going to be confirmed? Do you think he can make it?
No. I think he will, yeah. I've had a lot of senators call me up saying he's fantastic.
You don't drink yourself.
No.
You've talked about how devastating drinking can be.
No.
How concerned are you that the person who you picked for this top job at the Defense Department, at least according to those who've worked with him, has struggled with drinking?
But I've spoken to people that know him very well, and they say he does not have a drinking problem. Right. And, he had a lot of knives out for him. A lot of people don't want to see the military made better.
Let me ask you about former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. You picked her to be the director of national intelligence.
Right.
In 2017, she had 2 secret meetings with Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad. Do you have questions or concerns about those meetings?
No. And he's got bigger problems right now.
Well, do you think it makes it hard for her?
His country is collapsing.
Yeah. I mean, do you think it compromises her ability to handle that?
I met with Putin. I met with Kim Jong-un twice. Does that mean that I can't be president?
Well, when you were president, they weren't secret meetings.
Look, people meet. All these people meet. I mean, I see some of the most dishonest people. I'll tell you, the 51 agents that said that the laptop wasn't from Hunter, it was from Russia. What about them? Tell me about them. Do you think they did something wrong? Do you think they were all so stupid that they thought that the laptop from hell?
So you have confidence in Tulsi Gabbard?
I do. So does she's a very respected person.
Let me ask you about RFK Jr. He has obviously talked about his skepticism of vaccines. He's expressed opposition to childhood vaccines. Do you want to see childhood vaccines eliminated?
If they're dangerous for the children. Look.
So possibly?
When you look at some of the problems, when you look at what's going on with disease and sickness in our country, something's wrong.
Are you talking about autism?
Well, if you take a look at autism, you go back 25 years, autism was almost non-existent. It was, 1 out of 100,000. And now it's close to 1 out of 100.
Well,
I mean, what's happening? If they can find it. Now, I did something the other night that was a little unusual. At Mar-a-Lago, I called the drug companies, the top drug companies, and I called RFK Jr. and Dr. Oz and some of his people. And I said, let's all get together and let's figure out where we're going. Because we're going to do a lot of things. Number one, we're going to reduce prices because the middleman makes more money than the drug companies, in all fairness to the drug companies. There's a middleman that nobody even knows who they are. And you look at our drug prices, they're much higher than the prices for the same medicine, for the same stuff. So we met, and we met for a long time, and we talked about pricing, and we talked about vaccines, in terms of what happens. We talked about pesticides. We talked about everything. And I think a lot of good things are going to come from him. And he's not going to upset any system. He's not going to upset this. He's not looking to, to reinvent the wheel totally. But when you look at the numbers, we really don't have a very healthy country.
Well, sir, going back 25 years, studies show that there is no link between vaccines and autism. And yet it sounds like you are open to the possibility of him looking at getting rid of them?
I think somebody has to find out. If you go back 25 years ago, you had very little autism. Now you have it. I mean,
well, they say because they're better at identifying it.
1 in 100,000, and now it's 1 in 100. That's a pretty bad number.
Childhood vaccines.
I mean, something is going on. I don't know if it's vaccines. Maybe it's chlorine in the water, right? People are looking at a lot of different things.
Well, childhood vaccines.
I want them to look at everything.
Everything. So childhood vaccines have prevented about 4 million deaths around the world every year.
I think that's great. I'm all for it. I think it's great. Hey, look, I'm not against vaccines. The polio vaccine is the greatest thing. If somebody told me get rid of the polio vaccine, they're going to have to work real hard to convince me. I think certain vaccines are incredible. But maybe some aren't. And if they aren't, we have to find out. But when you talk about autism, because it was brought up, and you look at the amount we have today versus 20 or 25 years ago, it's pretty scary.
Well, again, scientists say that's because they've gotten better at identifying it, and there's no link in studies.
But the drug companies are going to be working with RFK Jr., and he's been an interesting guy to me. I've watched him for 25 years. And he's been an interesting guy.
Let's talk about Elon Musk, another interesting person.
He's very interesting.
Last month, one of your allies said, quote, he's behaving as if he's a co-president. Will you favor Elon Musk over other leaders of competitor companies like Jeff Bezos, Mary Barra?
No, Jeff Bezos called me. We're having dinner. As you know, Mark Zuckerberg came in. We had a really nice dinner. He asked to have dinner. I had dinner with him. I'm having dinner with everybody. People like me now. You know, it's something going on. That people. I said, would you have come to dinner with me if I lost? I think the answer is no. You know, I said nicely, kiddingly, of course, because I don't want to sound foolish. But I say jokingly, would you have been here at dinner if I lost? And the answer was probably not. Look, I'm getting called by everybody. It's very interesting. It's different than the first. You know, when I won the first time, I wasn't nearly as popular as this. And one thing that's very important in terms of the election, I love that I won the popular vote, and by a lot. If I didn't,
1.6%.
because they would go with the other one. They say, while he didn't win the popular vote, he won a lot of. You know, I won a lot of the Electoral College, but they would always preface it by saying. Now they say he won the popular vote and he won the Electoral College and he won all 7 swing states. That was a great election.
Very quickly, because we're going to talk about the election coming up, but you've tapped Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, to head up this Department of Government Efficiency.
Correct.
Which proposes cuts to the federal government. I think a lot of people hear that and they get concerned about Medicare and Social Security and
Not
Medicaid.
going to have anything to do.
And defense spending. You won't touch Medicare, Social Security?
Abuse, fraud. Okay. No, I said to people, we're not touching Social Security, other than we make it more efficient, but the people are going to get what they're getting.
Okay, so the entitlements
and
off the table.
And we're not raising ages or any of that stuff.
Okay,
no,
off the table.
I won't do it.
Okay, let's turn to foreign policy. Should Ukraine prepare for less aid from the United States after you're sworn into office?
Yeah, probably. Sure.
You've said you can end the war in 24
hours. We're in for $350 billion, and Europe is in for $100 billion. Why isn't Europe in for the same as us? The one thing that should happen is that Europe should come in they should equalize. And, you know, Biden, all he had to do, like I did with NATO, I said, you got to pay your bills. They weren't paying their bills. And as you know, the Secretary General said, President Trump got $600 billion, now 640 to be exact. And I used to use the 400 billion number. He corrected me. He said, no, you actually got $641 billion put in. Because I said, you have to pay your bills. We were paying for NATO. And you know why I got the money? Because I asked for it. It wasn't that complicated. Europe is in for a fraction. And war with Russia is more important for Europe than it is for us. It's important for everybody, but it's more important for Europe than it is for us.
And you've said
we have a little thing called an ocean in between us.
You said you can end the war in 24 hours. You've even said you want to try to end it before you're sworn into office. You're actively trying to?
I am.
Have you talked to President Putin?
No, I have not.
You haven't talked to President Putin since you've been elected?
No. Well, I don't want to say that, but I haven't spoken to him recently.
So you've spoken to President Putin since you've been elected?
I don't want to say that. I don't want to say anything about that because I don't want to do anything that could impede the negotiation.
But you
I want to stop
talked
it.
about
Let me tell you what I have
leaders.
talked about. Let me tell you. There are people being killed in that war at levels that nobody's ever seen before. You have to go back to the Second World War, and even that, if you take a look at, and you know what it is? It's the soldiers largely. The cities have been emptied out and demolished. The country has been demolished. If I won that election, which you know how I feel about it, I won't get into it because we don't need to start that argument. I think it's an easy argument. It was really proven even more conclusively by the win that I had on this one. But
you did go to court, sir.
Well, that's your opinion, but I disagree with it. Had I kept control, number one, Israel wouldn't have happened. Number two, Ukraine would have never happened. It would have never happened, Ukraine, Russia. But the number of people that are being killed, soldiers, young, beautiful soldiers, hundreds of thousands of people are being killed. And, you know, it's very interesting. It's level. Totally level, the battlefields, totally level. You know what's happening? Yeah. The only thing that stops a bullet, you know what it is a body, a human body. And the people that are being killed, hundreds of thousands on both sides. Russia's lost probably 500,000. Ukraine's lost higher than they say, probably 400,000. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of bodies laying all over fields. It's the stupidest thing I've ever seen, and it should have never been allowed to happen. Biden should have been able to stop it.
Sir, will the United States stay in NATO while you're in office?
In where?
NATO. Do you commit that the United States will remain a member of NATO while you're in office?
Again, they have to pay their bills. If they pay their bills, absolutely.
But not if they don't pay their bills.
But NATO's taken advantage of us because we were look, two things. Number one, they take advantage of us on trade, meaning the European nations, okay, like terrible. They don't take our cars. They don't take our food product. They don't take anything. It's a disgrace. And on top of that, we defend them. So it's a double whammy. So let me just tell you, I was able to get hundreds of billions of dollars put into NATO just by a tough attitude. I said to the countries, I'm not going to protect you unless you pay. And they started paying. And that amounted to more than $600 billion. That's a big thing. Otherwise, they wouldn't even be fighting. They wouldn't have any money to fight. If they're paying their bills, and if I think they're they're treating us fairly, the answer is absolutely, I'd stay with NATO.
But if not, you would consider the possibility of
absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Let's turn to the Middle East now, sir. There are still American hostages being held in Gaza. Yeah. You said this week that if the hostages aren't released before Inauguration Day, quote, there will be all hell to pay.
Correct.
What exactly did you mean? And do you still think that the hostages are alive?
I'm not a big believer in the fact that there are too many of them living, sadly, because I've seen the way they've been treated. I talk about the young girl that was pulled by her hair violently and thrown into the back of a car like she was a sack of potatoes. And I said, you know, that's hatred. And then I said, how did that young girl do? Beautiful young girl just dragged by her hair. You remember, blood pouring all over her body. You can imagine the parents thrown into the back of a car by some horrible guy. And I said, how is she? She's dead. She died, sir. I don't think you have as many. I mean, I hate to say it. I think you have far fewer hostages than people think.
Really?
That's what I think. It's only my opinion, but okay. I've been right on just about everything.
Are you going to pressure Prime Minister Netanyahu, with whom you have a very good relationship, to end the war in Gaza?
Yeah, sure.
And have you already started that process?
I want him to end it, but you got to have a victory. People forget about October 7th. That was as violent. And you know what's happening? I noticed that a lot of people are saying, oh, it never really happened. That's like the Holocaust. You know, you have Holocaust deniers. Now you have October 7th deniers, and it just happened. No, October 7th happened. And I've seen the pictures. What happened is horrible. Ding dong.